That was the Wasteland Wailers with Friendship from Fire. Hey there, friends. I'm Storybook, and welcome back to a nuclear reading show. Today, we're continuing Somber's Fallout Equestria Project Horizons. If you're enjoying what I'm bringing to the Wasteland, don't be afraid to tell your friends about me, or find me on Blue Sky as Nuclear Yuki. You could also do us a great favour and check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/ANRS. This story does include some graphic scenes that may be distressing to some people. Your own discretion in listening is advised. Oh, and also, since the gangs are still being feisty, Fallout is owned by Bethesda, and Hasbro made My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. With all that said and done, welcome, friends, to the Wasteland.
Chapter 15, Flank, Part 2. 3 hours later, Scalpel had restored me as much as the taint allowed. The old lavender pony simply scowled at a display that refused to change any further for the better. When I would get worse, and how I would get worse, remained to be seen. Scalpel had been surprisingly mute on the subject of magical chems. Some folks handle them just fine. Some folks don't. If I were you, I'd avoid them, but I'm not you. That was much better than Glory, who seemed ready to bludgeon me into senselessness with big egghead words. My barding was far less effective, since a sniper beam had punched a hole clear through the front and left side. The thought of the cost of repairs made my withers quake. That was after the 1,500 cap fee paid out to Scalpel. I didn't even try and haggle with her. I could see just how badly she needed the caps. With my barding rolled up, I felt decidedly exposed stepping out into Flank. I needn't have been concerned. Flank was the first true pony town I'd seen in the Wasteland. Little villages like Chapel and Stockyard, and I hated to admit Megamart, had nothing on Flank. 6 large buildings filled a block of 4-lane street. While the top floors were uninhabitable, light still glowed in the bottom floors. Strings of lights stretched back and forth across the street, and flashing neon signs constantly bathed the visitors in their colourful glow. The bland sign of Helping Hoof Quick Care was hardly helped by the addicts lingering about outside the doors. Across from the clinic was the Exchange, a bank partially converted into a market. Quality vendors had booths set up, and while I saw lots of weapons and chems for sale, there wasn't a lot of the extra material stacked on pallets like in Megamart. After selling our salvage, I'd inquired about getting my barding repaired. The price the vendor quoted made a liar out of bottle cap. Simple patching of holes in armour was apparently infinitely more expensive than data analysis. I bought a stable 89 utility harness. Hopefully Glory would work some of her repair magic. Outside the Exchange, we saw Mixers and the Trough. Mixers was a shop, one that peddled chems exclusively. It was also a club of sorts, but the music was certainly nothing like I'd heard on DJ Pone 3. It was all beat, and so fast that I suppose you'd have to be high on dash to really enjoy it. Mixers seemed to take chems to a whole new level. Stampede was one thing, but what was Rainboom? Or Philly Flash? The Trough surprised me. I hadn't ever seen a place devoted solely to food. In the first floor of an office building were a half-dozen little shops and restaurants catering to the inhabitants and visitors of Flank. I had to admit, I choked up a little at the sight of a store named 200 Years Fresh that seemed devoted to salvaged food. The sight of box after box of sugar apple bombs made my mouth water. There was a butcher shop that definitely had me a bit nervous. All meat looked the same, chopped up. And there was an enclave shop in the Trough. It was called Cloud Fresh. Outside were 2 Pegasus mares in less severe-looking uniforms than what I was familiar with. In fact, with the amount of flank they showed, it was hard to determine if they were wearing clothes or lingerie. There were bright, colourful banners showing apple trees growing amidst the clouds. Volunteer Corps, let us help! Their produce was certainly fresh, packed on ice or in trays, and cheaper than the produce being offered by the society ponies. Wonder how much of it will turn you into a raider. I could still see Tumbleweed's head coming apart from my telekinetic bullet spell. The 2 mares took one look at Glory and immediately closed for cleaning. They didn't even bother to hide their expressions of contempt for her fresh pink Dashite brands. Scalpel had healed the injury, but the scars from the chemicals used to burn away her cutie mark were permanent, even with magic. I supposed it would take a mega spell to restore her cutie mark. Gee, slave-grown produce from the society, or enclave produce that could turn you into a cannibalistic psychopath. I chewed my 2-century-old apple cereal with a bit more satisfaction. Rooms was simply that. A hotel with rooms ranging from a mattress in the lobby to private suites. That left Stable 69. The parking garage was certainly nothing impressive on its own, but it had been draped in neon lights that proclaimed, "Finest flank in Equestria." A 2-story high pink neon mare winked suggestively out at the street, next to a ridiculously endowed blue stallion. "Oh my," I muttered, going a touch pink myself. "Heh, I've seen bigger," Rampage snorted as she squinted up at the stallion, chewing another Mintel. "Aren't you eating a lot of those?" Glory asked, tapping her hooves together nervously. Rampage's pink eyes glared at her as she gave a little squeak, jumping behind me. "They calm me down and keep me from killing ponies that criticize my choice of mood-improving chemicals," she growled softly. "So, aren't you glad I've got a lot of them?" "So, aren't you eating a lot of those?" I asked now, coolly. I wasn't going to jump, no matter how she glared. "It's in her, Rampage. She's just concerned." "She doesn't have to bother," she said with a little snort. "I've survived a lot worse than Mintels." I took a deep breath. "All right. Well, we need to keep an eye open for P21 or U21. Took us 2 days to get here, so we might have gotten here first. You also need to cash in on those contracts for the finders." I looked at the entrance to Stable 69. "Which means we need to go in there." "I need to find parts for this beam rifle," Glory said as she twisted and pulled out Leo's magical beam weapon, setting it between her hooves. The internal workings tinkled ominously as she turned it upright. The barrel had an obvious bend in the middle. "You're seriously going to try and fix that piece of junk?" Rampage asked as she tapped her hoof claws against the metal housing. Was it just me, or did something new break just from that contact? "Junk?" Glory bristled. "Do you have any idea what this is?" "Do you have any idea how little I care?" Rampage replied dully as she leaned back. "This was an AER-14 prototype, one of a limited run that was developed to replace the Nova Surge rifle. Only 20 were produced before research was cancelled due to, well, the Balefire mega spells." She lifted it in her hooves. "And look, it has an emerald refocusing crystal instead of the standard ruby. And a Type D spark capacitor. A Type D. I've only seen them in books." She glared at Rampage. "And you broke it." Rampage just sat there a moment, and then smacked the wrecked weapon once more with her hoof, denting the casing. Glory hugged the barrel to her chest with a whimper. You barbarian," she gasped as the striped reaper grinned at her. "Why, thank you," she replied with a grin. "Well, since you two have your plans, I'm gonna go get plowed. See you later," she said as she trotted away eagerly, swaying her hips and making her metal plates rattle as she danced her way into Stable 69. "She's terrible. Why don't we just leave her once we have P21? Glory asked with a little frown. "We owe her," I said with a shrug. "She's also one of the few ponies I can think of that really doesn't care about the bounty on my head. Plus, I'd rather not have her prowling around behind me." "She's still terrible, and she's always eating those Mintels. I have to wonder how bad she is when she's off them," she said as she stowed the ruined rifle between her wings. "I'll head over to the exchange and see if I can find anything out about P21. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" "Are you sure you'll be?" Glory countered, looking at the brothel behind me. "I know you're not in uniform and that Flank has a neutral ground policy, but what if some pony tries something?" "Well, then I'll do something stupid," I replied with a smile. "I'm good at that." Glory winced. The wrecked wagons inside the parking garage were stacked up in a corridor that funneled down towards an open service hatch. Pink lights gave the service tunnel a vaguely organic feel that made my limbs creep. Posters with mares on one side and stallions on the other advertised the selection to the clientele. Had I not been preoccupied by P21 and what I'd done to him, I might have been in the mood for some enjoyment as well. I reached the round door to the stable, surprised to see that instead of rolling, it was mounted on a swing arm. A huge pink 69 seemed to greet us, as did the handsome stallion and cute mare standing in the entryway. I looked a little closer at the numbers and saw that the actual number on the stable had been 89, with part of the 8 painted over to resemble a 6. After seeing stable 90, I'd expected to walk into an atrium like 99. Instead, we were threaded past a utility storage area. The doors were all locked, and it'd be a little conspicuous to fiddle with them with patrons passing me by. Finally, the hallway split into 3 arrows: finders, fun, and future employment. As tempting as the second was, Caps came first. The finder's office was also the overmare's. I had to admit, I wasn't too happy about that. Something else I found unnerving: no guards, no turrets. I couldn't believe that nothing was protecting the stable. I walked to the overmare's door with a sigh and a frown. I guessed it was time to do business with Bottlecap's sister. Out to lunch. Be back whenever. Or not. I hate waiting. Since future employment was not interesting to me, I followed the majority of the ponies in the direction of fun. Finally, we reached the atrium. I found myself surrounded by a pinkgasm. The colour was everywhere. Couches and pillows were arranged around little tables as stallions and mares circulated with suggestive smiles and strange, elaborate and kinky outfits. Given that the ponies had no problem trotting around naked, covering up in feathers, lace, furs, or in strange outfits was one of the kingier things I'd seen. In fact, I couldn't see the goods of a single mare or stallion. Rampage was nowhere in sight, so I figured she'd already snagged her victim. I had visions of orgiastic excess, which showed just how off my mind was. There were a number of stallions who seemed drugged out of their skulls as they sat around smiling pleasantly at everyone. Dash inhalers were everywhere. Me, I stuck with wild Pegasus. "You don't look like you're having fun," a peach-coloured mare observed from behind the bar as she poured my second shot. Purple hair fell across her eyes as she gave me a friendly smile. "Is it the drinks? The company? Do you need a hit?"
"I'm just waiting for Caprice to get back to her office."
The little earth pony gave me a worried little frown.
"It's not you or the place. The whiskey's good, and I don't mind the decoration. It's just there's a lot on my mind right now."
"Oh, a lot on the mind. Yeah, I hear that a lot,"
the bar pony said with a sympathetic nod.
"Still, if you can have fun, you should. Sitting there all sour doesn't do you any good."
She immediately perked up.
"I know. Let me make you something special."
"You don't have to."
I started, but she was already diving into the refrigerator and pulling out various bottles. I wasn't sure if she was doing cooking or chemistry with what was going on in that shaker. She sat up, shaking the metal cups briskly, and then poured something yellow into a glass.
"Here, this should make you smile,"
she said as she pushed the glass to me. I glanced at it skeptically, but she seemed too earnest for me not to try it. Well, here's hoping it's not drugged or something, I thought, and took a drink. Instantly, sweet tartness splashed across my tongue, and I swallowed in surprise. The sour tang lingered for just a bit, and then it was replaced by a slight alcoholic burn that made quick friends with the whiskey I'd drunk before. I smiled, despite my mood, and drank the other half.
"That's really good. Thank you,"
I said as I looked her up and down.
"I'm Blackjack."
"I figured. That one's on the house. You look like you needed it,"
she said as she looked at my cutie mark.
"You know, there's gambling over at Rooms. Cards, dice, roulette. You might have some fun there."
"You seem a bit fixated on my entertainment,"
I observed with a smile.
"Is that so bad?"
she said as she took off her apron and handed it to one of the other mares behind the bar.
"I mean, everything in the hoof is so terrible. So why not a place you can enjoy yourself? We have ponies from all over come here to unwind. dance, get high, have sex, pay for the pleasure and go home with a smile,
she said as she trotted out from behind the counter.
Yeah, it sounds great in theory, but then you look at all the blasted ponies hanging around about the quick care and the price gets a little steep. Caprice makes money off misery.
She cocked her head and looked at me sadly.
You really think so?
I don't know, and I don't understand it. How does she live with making money off selling chems to addicts?
Believe it or not, Flank isn't in the policy of stringing ponies out till they're falling apart. The original stable was a chemist's dream come true. There were chemicals stored here that had names so long you'd have to take a breath or two to name them. Unfortunately, the place was also lacking in entertainment, so some enterprising pony mixed up something fun. Then another did, and then another.
The peach mare sighed, rolling her eyes a little.
Eventually, the party ran out because some pony mixed up a nerve gas and released it into the ventilation systems.
Whoops,
I muttered. Had the stables been designed to self-destruct? Had stable tech been some sick experimental dream?
Pretty much. The survivors got out and fortunately ran into Keeper. The original Flank was a mess of drug dens and brothels. It's only been cleaned up in the last couple years. Still, there's all kinds of secondary dealers who couldn't care less who they sell to. They keep the scavengers picking over for anything valuable in the ruins. The secondary dealers sell that in the exchange. Buy more Dash, and the cycle continues.
So why doesn't Caprice stop it?
How? Dash is easy to make and there's caches and materials all across Flank. If it were banned, then the buyers with real money would just go straight to the dealers, and all control would be lost. It's better for some wealthy society aristopony to get high than a starving addict looking for a fix.
So if some pony took out these dealers, what would happen?
Well, I know Flank would be grateful. Since Mixers doesn't sell samples, the addicts would have more incentive to go to quick care. It would raise prices, making treatment easier than another high. Of course, Scalpel would probably complain about all the extra work.
I frowned. I knew I should be looking for Caprice and P21. I knew I shouldn't be looking for trouble. But I also remembered how I had felt. My body dying, craving more buck, more steady, more Hydra. How much it had hurt. Maybe it was the drinks, or maybe it was thinking about what I'd said to Scalpel. I looked at the peach pony and then smiled.
And where would a pony find these dealers?
Are you sure about this idea?
Glory whispered as we looked at the factory and storage tanks a mile north or so of Flank. Once I'd found her and explained my plan, she'd been skeptical, but she came with me after using the 89 barding to patch up my security gear. It might not be much right now, but I felt better with it on.
Of course, it's my idea, and I'm sure all my ideas are bad,
I replied as we looked over the warehouse.
Well then, why?
She began, and then she saw my smile and flushed.
Blackjack humor. Sorry.
The first dealer had been a simple affair. One mare working out of the back of a wagon, with 2 stallions guarding her. All that it had taken was the look, and a suggestion that she sell me her entire stock of Dash and get out of Flank now. I suggested Brimstone's Fall. I only hoped that she'd make the trip. The second dealer had been a larger operation. A half-dozen ponies working out of a gas station. That fight had been messy, but not particularly difficult. I'd used the pump-action shotgun, loaded with flechette rounds. Only one pony had enough armor to require the heavy revolver from the airbase. Not only did we secure their drug stash, we also greatly improved our own goods with their weapons and stockpiled wares. This dealer was different. I wasn't looking forward to fighting off 24 guards. On top of the 2-story building was a large sign that read Boom Inc., in letters surrounded by fireworks. From all of the empty barrels outside, I suspected they weren't just reselling drugs from Flank. They were manufacturing their own too. There were wagons just waiting to be loaded. This wasn't just some little side operation. This was a full-on competitor. Rampage gave a great yawn as she shook herself.
So, you want me to just go over there and kill them all?
She asked as she narrowed her eyes at the building.
No,
I replied with a frown. My mane was itching like mad as I watched them roll a barrel of magic waste into the building. What the hell were they putting in these drugs?
First, Because I don't know if you can.
She looked vaguely insulted.
Secondly, I don't want to kill the guards and let whoever's running the show slip out the back.
Oh, fine. So if we're not going to just charge in all nice and sensible, then what?
I admitted that I wasn't entirely sure. We circled around to the side, but the back of the warehouse was completely sealed up. A large round water tank rose up behind the building with a bridge of pipes connecting one to the other. I couldn't exactly see how we could get up on the water tank. I looked at Glory.
Are you sure you can't fly?
The grey Pegasus looked pained as she looked back at her wings. She bit her lip and started to flap, clenching her eyes shut. Her hooves rose from the ground, then she jerked and flopped over on her back. She sniffed and rubbed her eyes. I'm sorry, Blackjack.
Don't worry about it.
It looked like we were going to have to go in shooting. Then I noticed the metal stairs going up to a second-story door. They looked pretty rickety, but it was them or go in guns blazing and hope for the best. After getting a hole punched through me by Leo, I wanted to save that for a plan B. Ugh, I must be getting old. We picked our way around the side of the warehouse and then made our way up step after step. I made sure Rampage waited till we were up. The door was locked, but I thought I might get lucky. I screwed my face up, sticking my tongue to the side as I lamented yet again P21's absence. 2 pins later, I found the sweet spot and twisted. There had to be an easier way to open locks. Moving inside the second floor of the Boom fireworks factory, I was struck by the cobwebs and debris strewn across the floor. Clearly, this wasn't a part of the factory that was in use. I made my way through a few offices, but aside from a dozen or so caps in a drawer, there wasn't much of interest. Faded pictures decorated the halls, many showing elaborate fireworks over a shining white palace. Pinkie Pie danced with a sparkler in each hoof under a sky filled with fireworks, underneath a caption that read, "Explosions are fun, in the sky. Safety first." We found one room loaded with boxes and boxes of fireworks and rockets. Yes, Pinkie Pie, explosions are fun. We found another office with a large poster of Pinkie Pie shaking hooves with a black Pegasus, with, of course, a firework explosion cutie mark. Carefully nudging aside the rag-wearing bones behind the desk, I noticed his terminal was still on and logged in. I wiped away the dust on the screen.
Memo 34. Hey Sparkler! I couldn't help but notice that the latest batch of fireworks was a lot less whoosh and whoosh, and a lot more fizzle and pizzle. It's just not a party if folks see a little pop and then nothing. So could you please do me an eatsy beatsy teeny weeny favour and up the bang a little? Pretty please with sprinkles on top. PP. Memo 35. Hi Sparkler. Gotta say I'm a mite distressed. I got folks wondering where a whole shipment of ammonium perchlorate went, and I'm a mad curious myself. So I'd be one grateful pony if you could make sure your next batch of the stuff gets to my munitions plants. Can't fight zebras without the stuff what goes boom. Brayburn. Memo 38. Sparkler, where did that AP go? I got MOM and MWT up in my main and I don't know what to tell them. I'm sending in more materials to try and catch up. Who's our liaison with the OIA? Onyx? Or was it Emerald? Do they know where it went? Pres Boomer.
Unfortunately, the rest of the terminal was corrupted gibberish. I looked at the indolent expression on Rampage's face as she asked sardonically,
Find anything useful?
No, but you never know.
I replied as we returned back into the hall. A few more bobby pins later, and the door at the end of the hall was unlocked as well. Pulling open the door, I saw a long catwalk stretching out over a production floor. Hundreds of barrels were stacked on pallets, and many of them had fallen over and spilled heaps of white powder. In the middle were a dozen chemistry sets, and a trio of cooks busy making something. Dash? Yes. I saw the empty inhalers in a bin next to one workstation, but they were also making something else. Those ampules were familiar. What was glaringly out of place was a pen near a hatch on the second story. It was full of filthy and destitute scavengers. Were these dealers accepting slaves as payment? There were also a lot of guards, and automatic turrets watching the doors. I looked at Rampage and all that noisy, clangy metal. Even with the radio blaring Redbeard's bluster down by the cooks, I couldn't imagine that the ponies below would miss that racket. The radio host's rusty voice boomed in the cavernous production space over the hiss of hot plates and bubbling equipment.
Now I like to keep my ears open. Like to be a pony of the people. So eventually I am going to hear about some kind of Brahmin shit about security. Well, guess what, folks? Looks like security is a tried and true devotee of the slaughter phalange after all. I heard it on very good authority that security charged into flank this afternoon, foaming at the mouth and grinning like a dash head in heat. So you heard it here first, folks. Security. Big tweaker.
Rampage snickered softly, and I gave her a look. "What?" she asked defensively. Then my lips curled and I glanced at her hoof claws. "What?" she muttered, now worried. A minute later, she sulked out of the office with strips of sparkle as rags wrapped around each hoof like booties. "This is humiliating." "Shush," I warned her, and Glory, bringing up the rear, struggled to not laugh at the sight. "Hey, we need more juice! Crowbar!" One of the cooks shouted up to the balcony. "Yeah, on it!" A unicorn stallion in leather barding yelled back as he walked to a crate and lifted some dash inhalers. Another guard opened the doors of the pen and let out a slow stream of ponies. "Come on, folks! We promised you dash, and you're gonna get dash!" There was something decidedly creepy in his tone and grin as he bobbed the inhalers above their heads, leading them out of the door. When 14 or 15 were out, the doors were closed in the face of the next pony, and the other guard brought up the rear of the addicts. I raised a hoof to my lips as we followed the catwalk towards the balcony. There were still 2 guards remaining, and right now I found myself really wishing that I had Minty Fresh's silenced pistol. Fortunately, Luna does provide the occasional blessing, such as a wooden baseball bat lying on a table next to some very dated copies of Playmare and Pony Life.
Dash. You gonna give me dash?
One of the prisoners mumbled. The guard turned, spotted me and my barding, and took a deep breath. That was as far as his shout got as I swung with all my horn's strength and crushed his windpipe with a meaty thud. His mouth worked, 4 hooves scrabbling at the indentation in his throat. The bat came around and knocked his rear hooves out from under him. As his face blackened and I kept him pinned, I heard a crack and a thump from the direction of where the other guard had been. Apparently, cloth booties were little protection against a mare that could kick your head so hard that it'd flop around like a horn puppet.
"Come on,"
I whispered as we moved along the balcony towards the open door. A few of the ponies in the cage looked at me dully. One called out to ask if I had any dash, but the ponies below ignored the noise. The door led to the bridge connecting to the large, cracked concrete water tank outside. From above, we could see that the dome atop the tank was busted, and 4 large cages were bolted to the top of the tank around the rim. Yellow hazardous waste containers were strewn around the edges. For the moment, though, I was focused on the ponies loading the cages with addicts. "What are they doing?" Glory asked softly.
Can we just kill them all and not care?
Rampage replied, munching down another Mintal.
Not yet.
I glanced at the box of dash inhalers and lifted it to us.
I want you to get those prisoners out through the offices. Get them clear and make sure they're quiet.
You're saving dash heads.
I'm saving ponies, Rampage. You can leave if you don't like it.
She looked at me levelly, then sighed and shook her head with a smile.
Fine. I can play white hat. Best have her do the talking, though.
I was surprised by that.
When the rest are clear, I'm going to start lighting up crates. I don't know if they'll explode, but there's got to be enough fireworks around here for something to go up. If not, well, do something smarter than what I'd do. Now get them out of here quietly,
I said as I nodded to the cage. Glory approached with soothing words as Rampage brought the box of dash inhalers. That left me with the other prisoners. Carefully, I stepped out onto the bridge that ran atop pipes stretching from the fireworks factory to the water storage tank. Fortunately, my luck seemed to be changing. Every pony with a gun was loading the addicts into the heavy-duty cages running around the edge of the collapsed roof of the water tank. I moved as nonchalantly as possible, carbine loaded with standard rounds. Of course, one look at me and the party would start. There were lots of crates and empty waste barrels stacked along the bridge that I hung close to as I approached.
It's getting too big, Domino. Too damn big.
I caught the voice of the unicorn stallion that had led the addicts out into the water tank. Crowbar watched as the adult unicorns were loaded up.
We keep putting the barrels down there like you said, but it's not working. Bigger is better. We're making caps all over hoof. All we need is a few dozen more lab rats and we'll have product better than anything mixers can offer,
said a unicorn with the strangest mottled black and white coat. She had an odd white mask for her cutie mark.
Ring the bell.
Crowbar levitated a crowbar off his belt and rapped it hard against an empty barrel. The guards shoved one pony into the tank with a yell, that cut off with a splash, then a deep growl filled the air. A serpentine head rose slowly above the edge of the hole and opened its mouth to let out a shriek. Even in severe dash withdrawal, the prisoners began to scream. A chain opened a door on the far side of one of the cages, and the head slipped into the hole and started to munch. The chain dropped and the heavy door closed, trapping it inside with its meal. A unicorn plunged a sharpened pipe into a pink, pulsating knot of flesh on the neck, and a brownish red sludge poured out into a barrel. Suddenly, I knew exactly where Hydra came from. Just as suddenly, I knew I never, ever wanted to take Hydra again.
Show is fucking over! Let them out!
I yelled as I stepped around a stack of pipes. The trapped Hydra head began to jerk at its bonds, now that there were no pony treats within to savour.
You!
The dapple-coated mare exclaimed as she backed away.
Kill her quickly, before the others arrive.
Ante up. Crowbar wasted no time in swinging his length of steel at my head, and I had little time to waste as I danced back and hit Sats, just as he jammed something into his thigh. Then, to my amazement, he started to actually move. The potion he'd injected accelerated him to the point that he crept closer in my vision. I toggled 4 shots to his head and released the spell. This time, Sats wasn't fast enough. Crowbar moved inside the range of my carbine barrel and slammed into me as the guards left their positions near the cages and ran around the edge of the water tank. As I came out of the Sats spell, I found myself on my back with the rust-coloured pony atop me. Then his horn glowed as the crowbar smashed across my face with such force that my next shots with the carbine went wide. I just needed a few seconds to focus. Just a few seconds.
Pity to smash such a pretty face,
he taunted, putting the bar right down at my face as I struggled to control the gun. Then I opened my mouth wide, and the steel bar slammed right between my jaws. I felt enamel crack under the impact, but living in a stable had given me an unexpected advantage. Healthy teeth. My jaws clenched down, and I grinned around the bar as he tried to yank it free. The carbine steadied and unloaded 6 rounds into his back. Screaming in pain, he rolled off me to get away. Then I realised why there were 4 cages as a second head rose above the edge of the tank, dripping rainbow-tinted water, and a third, and a fourth. Smaller vestigial heads snapped at the air like hungry pustules. Clearly, it had risen in the anticipation of a meal and was not happy to find the cages closed. Brown and twisted teeth snapped at the heavy metal bars, ironically now protecting the addicts inside. The practical beast began to strike at the guards instead.
Kill her! Kill it! Kill something!
Domino shrieked as she levitated a sleek black automatic from her holster and began to fire. I rolled to my feet, feeling the impact on my plates. I ran for the nearest cage, narrowing my eyes to cut down the nearest guard with some well-placed headshots. I slid behind the heavy metal just as one head snapped at me, moments too late. My horn flipped the carbine and emptied the remainder of the clip into the head. Annoying to the mutated behemoth, no doubt, but satisfying. Domino and the guards were, for the moment, occupied with the other angry heads. The trapped head was now jerking with such force that I could hear the metal groaning and twisting. I looked at the lock. No time for bobby pins. I grabbed it with my magic and twisted. Slowly the tumbler rotated bit by bit. Almost. Snap, and the lock broke. Really? Celestia? I mean, really? I looked at the old padlock. Well, I may not have been able to open the lock, but I still had a crowbar. I jammed the pry bar in and put all my weight upon it. I even tried to bounce a little. Then the lock snapped open and I fell flat on my face. Oh, that was a tooth missing, all right. Getting to my hooves, I swapped out for the 12-gauge pump action.
Get ready to run!
I shouted at them.
Follow the catwalk through the offices. You'll find Dash outside.
Okay, drug craving plus survival instinct trumped their brain-addled wits.
Go!
I shouted as I jumped out from behind the cover of the cage, firing as fast as I could and screaming like a maniac. One Hydra head looked over at a portion of its buffet out in the open. 3 of the ponies were sickly and easy targets, but I was the one dancing around like an idiot with a shotgun. It snapped as I dove to the side. My shotgun blasted 3 solid hits to its skull as its deformed jaws snapped where I'd stood a second ago. Scrambling, I kept running as Domino backed around the cage with the trapped head. A guard charged towards me, or maybe he was running for his life, I don't know which. I hooked my front hooves into the bars and swung my entire body around, slamming him back. He staggered, staring at me in fury as he drew a machete from his belt. Then a Hydra mouth grabbed him and yanked him upwards. The mouth released him, flinging him screaming into the air. Another mouth grabbed his head, a third his haunches, and together they tore him in 2.
Don't start!
I warned my brain, smacking my forehead against the steel. For once, my subconscious seemed to be cutting me some slack. I looked at the lock, focused, twisted, and snap.
Load of piss on you and all locks, you rusty piece of shit!
I screamed at the indifferent, inanimate object. I jammed the crowbar in and put my weight on it again. I even tried to use my horn to add the last little bits of force. The crowbar bent, then the lock broke.
Through the...
I started, but the 3 ponies inside bolted as soon as the door opened. One Hydra head snapped out, catching the leg of a mare. I screamed, running towards the head before it could get a better bite. I blew out one of the 5 eyes with one shot, and then jammed the barrel into the oozing cavity for a second. Gore splattered me. For all I knew, I was adding to my taint total. But that didn't matter right now. My shots worked. I managed to get its attention, and in a big way. The mare limped for her life as the wounded head reared back. The trapped head twisted and thrashed, pulling and pulling, and the whole wall of the water tank began to crumple. I ran around towards where the last cage perched, and suddenly the ledge gave way. The cage fell into the scummy, rainbow-slicked water, along with the cage holding the Hydra head. Water began to pour out of the breach as the trapped head worked itself free. The edge of the water tank crumbled under the dapple-hided unicorn, and with a scream, Domino tumbled into the water and disappeared from sight. Small favours. That was it then. No more reason for me to stay here. I stood and started to back for the bridge when Crowbar slammed into me like a rabid dragon. We went rolling, my shotgun skittering out of range. He laughed hysterically as he kicked and stomped like a maniac. The bullet holes weren't slowing him down at all, and I could see why. From all the empty ampules and needles scattered about, he dosed himself with the entire medicine cabinet. The Hydra began to pull itself free, but Crowbar only had eyes for me as he grabbed my ear in his teeth and pulled me off my hooves.
Gonna smash ya! Gonna smash ya good!
He screamed. I struggled to push him off, but it was no good. I raised my rear hoof and slammed his nuts with all my might. He didn't even feel it. I hit Sats and toggled 3 telekinetic blasts to his face. The first smashed his eye like a hammer, but he jerked his head, and the last 2 did far less damage. In fact, as I watched, his eye was regenerating.
Gonna kill ya! 'Cause I'm stronger! I'm stronger!
He screamed as he pressed his hooves to my skull and started to squeeze. I felt ominous noises. The chems had made him stronger, tougher, regenerating. But then I looked at the oozing grey flesh. It was time to raise or fold.
Yeah, but you're not heavier.
I shouted as I braced my limbs and lifted for all I was worth. The Hydra's head came down, bit into his back, and lifted him into the air. His death grip on my head was so tight that it yanked me into the air after him. Another head lunged for me, a tasty, helpless snack, when I slipped free and fell to the metal planking. 2 bites, and Crowbar was gone. I prayed it was just my imagination, that I was hearing him scream as he slid down the monster's gullet. I got on my hooves and ran for my life. The entire bridge shook and suddenly slanted up as it crumpled under the Hydra's weight. My hooves scrambled for purchase on the metal as the monster crawled out of its tank after the next morsel in sight. Me. For once, I'd gotten lucky. The garbage stacked on the leaning edge thumped into the Hydra more than it did me, and I pulled myself up, firing blindly behind me. When the shotgun was empty, I swapped to the carbine again. Inside the factory, Glory stood on the catwalk strafing enemies while Rampage engaged half a dozen of a screaming, thrashing madmare. The turrets were smoking wrecks, but there were more than a dozen cooks and guards firing at the pair. I ran to the rail and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Run!" Glory stopped raining magical beams on the enemy. The guards stared up at me in shock. Rampage clutched a pony in her hooves, mindlessly chewing on one ear. For a moment, I was sure that they would all flee. Then, "Killer!" And now they were firing at me and Glory, and had resumed dogpiling on Rampage. I screamed in frustration as I ducked for cover. Then 4 Hydra heads roared with hunger, and once more the shooting stopped. The 4 heads slammed through the open door behind me, snapping as the monster's incredible bulk tore the wall apart. The balcony collapsed with the wall, slumping down into the floor below as the catwalks collapsed. Glory yelped as she scrambled back into the officers. Rampage snapped the neck of her pony, then looked at the Hydra with a whoop.
All right, now that is something to fight,
she said as she tossed the body aside and leapt to her hooves.
Run, you idiot,
I said as I picked myself up, facing the monster as it crawled through the hole after its lunch.
Run?
She looked positively incensed.
Run? I am a Reaper. We don't do run,
she yelled as she charged at the Hydra. One mouth bit down on her steel-plated ass, another grabbed her head and lifted her into the air, pulling and twisting. Rampage laughed in glee, twisting and kicking whatever she could as her bladed armor cut into the monster's mouths.
Yeah, you like that? I'll tear you apart from the inside out.
She might be psychotic, but she did give every pony a chance to get out of there. Unfortunately, I couldn't imagine that even she'd be enough to stop the thing. Not for the first time. I lamented my lack of heavy weaponry. Even a grenade would be... Wait. Boxes of strange and hazardous chemicals. Drums of older strange and hazardous chemicals. More boxes thrown off to the sides and full of fireworks. And me, with lots of incendiary bullets. Stupid, crazy, liable to get me killed. What was I waiting for? My telekinesis loaded the carbine with red incendiary rifle rounds, and I raced across the factory, shooting anything that looked remotely flammable. The beakers and chemistry sets in the middle of the room started burning quite readily, but they didn't have the force I needed. The 2 free heads of the Hydra continued snapping after me as the other pair continued to break their teeth on Rampage's armor. I focused on any crate marked boom, guessing the fireworks were my best bet. One crate started to smoke, fizzle, and then there was a pop.
That was it? Oh, come on! What kind of fireworks don't explode?
The Hydra had had enough of the Reaper. With a snap of its heads, it threw her with such force that she shattered the reinforced glass in a window and went flying out. Now there was just 1 edible morsel and 4 hungry heads. And after it ate me, would it eventually wander to flank? I backed towards the door behind me and took aim at the metal barrels across the room, marked ammonium something or other. 3 burning rounds punched through the metal. There was a hiss, a pop, then a flame so bright it nearly blinded me jetted out from the metal drum and sprayed across the back of the Hydra. The fire spread to the rest of the stack. I really wish I had one of Crowbar's acceleration potions as I ran for the door. There wasn't a boom, as much as a roar that built and built. A great wind lifted me up and threw me through the door like a bullet as a chemical sun dawned in the wasteland. I rolled across the parking lot and landed sitting in a heap. Then the factory exploded. The booming factory lived up to its namesake as the walls disintegrated in a detonation that slammed me flat on my back. Any Hydra that might have remained inside was vaporized, and the shockwave drained what remained in the water tank. The deluge put out most of the fire, though not much remained after that explosion. I picked myself up, slung the carbine around my neck, and walked to where the remaining guards and freed ponies watched in amazement. I looked at them, grinned at the lot, minus one tooth, damn it, and said,
Pinkie Pie was right. Explosions are fun.
Then my eyes rolled up in my sockets as I crashed face first into the ground. Apparently me blowing up a factory and a monster in one go was enough of a spectacle that none of the survivors thought to cut my head off while I was out. Glory, who'd had the common sense to flee, and Rampage, who'd been ejected for being indigestible, had reinforced how that would be a bad idea, and so I came to once again in the autodock. Apparently shockwaves are bad for the brain, particularly when you just recovered from a near-death experience less than a day prior. You stay here another week and I'll be able to retire to Tempony Tower, Scalpel said with a dry chuckle as I emerged from the machine a fourth time. Then she shook her head a bit sadly. Never seen a pony so set on getting herself blown up. Her eyes peered at me, as if searching for something. So you did good? I stretched and shook myself, then brushed my black and red hair out of my face.
You tell me.
The mature lavender mare shrugged. I got 30 or so ponies lining up to start detox. It's a lot harder for scavengers to get cheap dash. And I heard that Caprice is plenty happy some pony finally took care of that operation over in the fireworks factory. So yeah, I'd say you done good. I sighed as I sat.
It's still not enough, though.
Scalpel shook her head. You've done more in a night for folks than any pony ever did. How can you not be square after that? I sighed as I closed my eyes.
You do everything you can to make up for it, knowing that you'll never succeed in getting rid of the guilt. You devote yourself to spending every second trying to do better, despite the fact that it will never be enough. And you pray with every single good act you do that somehow, when your life is over, that your lifetime will come close to making up for the wrongs you committed.
Scalpel stared in shock. What was all that?
Something some pony told me to make up for a wrong I did. I thought it was my first. It wasn't. It wasn't even my worst wrong.
I said quietly, still smiling.
It's why it'll never be square. It's why I've always got to keep trying to make it square, and I'll always lose.
I sighed.
There were 3 ponies who died in a cage. Maybe I could have saved them if I tried harder. I don't know.
Scalpel looked at me for one moment and then grumbled. You're an idiot. Then she put her hooves around me in a brief, tight hug before releasing me. Bravest, boldest damn idiot in the wasteland, but still an idiot, she muttered as she stood and walked to the door. Now, if you don't mind, I've got a whole waiting room full of dashheads wanting to try and kick their fix, so if you'll excuse me, I'm pretty sure Caprice got you a place to stay at rooms. To be honest, I was pretty tired. Glory was looking for P21 again. Rampage was doing whatever it was she did. I just wanted to buy something to eat at the trough and sleep till I woke naturally. No explosions, no horrors, nothing. I passed on some fresh apples from the society, even though they were offered at a discount. I'd take 2-century-old food over the product of slave labour. Then I trotted to the hotel to find that a room had been booked for me. Very nice. Quiet. 3rd floor. I had to admit, of all the places in Equestria, the suite sure fit the bill. The room smelled only a little bit of mould, and the water stains on the ceiling weren't super huge. I locked the door and sat back to read the hoof-to-hoof book that I'd found in Miramere's locker room. Thanks Celestia for the big pictures. I read about a style of fighting called Fallen Caesar that reminded me of the zebras in No Pony's Land charging the marauders. It looked terrifying, to be honest. Doom Bunny technique sounded even worse. Martial arts, with Stampede, could not be pretty. The entry marked Fool's Gambit made me chuckle. Who ever heard of a fighting style based entirely on moment-to-moment improvisation? Unfortunately, while I could really use a nap, my brain still wasn't making it any easier for me to get one. I kept playing back the fight with the Hydra. I kept looking at that cage full of ponies falling into the rainbow water. Could I have jumped in and saved them? Had that been an option I'd missed? Ugh. Why did my stupid brain never make anything easy? Not being able to sleep bordered on boredom for me, and boredom was intolerable. I considered reading one of Glory's scientific Equestrias, but half a paragraph about magical crystal reactors had me feeling stupid, not sleepy. I needed something else to do. Well, I still had those 2 memory orbs from Miramare, the ones I'd found in Colonel Cupcake's office.
No. The last time I was inside one of those things, I was captured by the Enclave. Before that, a magical trap in one shut my brain down.
I muttered, but I dug out the orbs anyway. The door was locked. I was perfectly safe, right? It wasn't like I needed a guard while I was out. I looked skeptically at the 2 orbs and lifted one with my magic. I felt the magical connection form. Then, nothing. Clearly this orb had been locked as well. Maybe it was some classified secret of Colonel Cupcake's. Maybe it was about the Marauders, or Vanity's little memory extraction of Jetstream. I wish that I could have had another peek at Macintosh's Maripony in the stars. Okay, warning next time please. This memory seemed to have little to do with stars, however, as I found myself surrounded by a cacophony of noise and activity. Dust and smoke filled my lungs as I walked. No, not walked. I loomed. I rose above the milling crowd with slow, sure steps. Careful steps. A sprig of wheat dangled out of my mouth. Big. Chewing on grass. Glimpses of red hide and brown mane. I had an inkling whose memory this was. All around me, I saw the reconstruction of Hoofington. A massive open pit in the north end of the island connected to train tunnels. As the train cars pulled through, teams of Pegasi would fly down and attach hooks to the I-beams or sacks of concrete or whatever else they were unloading, and lift them with cranes out of the pit and onto rail cars that ran along the city streets. Teams of earth ponies stood by, hauling their loads out into the city in a constant stream of activity. Everywhere I looked, ponies worked. Everywhere I looked, Hoofington rose. Unfortunately, all the construction around the pit made it more than a little hazardous. Big Macintosh kept his eyes open, but the same could not be said about a light blue unicorn trotting along with her face in a map.
Now, if this is north and that is east, then I think I need to head this way,
she muttered as she peered at the map in her face. Miss? Big Macintosh warned as she approached one of the rails. 6 tough earth ponies were hauling a stack of metal rods along the rails down the middle of the street. The locals stopped well back of the supply line. The blue unicorn didn't seem aware of how close she was to the rails.
But I already went that way. Oh, confound it. Why can't any pony label anything in this city? It's crazy.
Miss! Big Macintosh raised his voice a touch higher in concern as more ponies started to shove in behind her.
Oh, why can't this place be more like Manhattan? I can at least see the Statue of Friendship in the harbour and...
There was a hard shove as 3 arguing ponies rammed into the blue unicorn, knocking her onto the rails.
Get out of the way!
The pony leading the cart shouted in alarm.
We can't stop!
Big Macintosh didn't hesitate. He dove towards the fallen unicorn as the lead ponies almost stomped her. Don't worry, miss. I got... She disappeared in a flash of purple magic. You? Macintosh staggered forwards onto the tracks. He looked at the oncoming train and jumped clear just in time. The pulling team shouted for him to go back to Ponyville. He sat down hard as the supply train passed, looking around. Miss? Miss? You all right?
Over here,
the light blue unicorn said as she adjusted her thick glasses and then blinked.
Big Macintosh?
Her mane was a darker navy with a streak of electric blue in her tail and mane. I couldn't make out her cutie mark. Her saddlebags covered it up too well. Yup. You know me, miss? He said as he stood and walked towards her. As the supply train passed, the crowd resumed their motions around the city. Her blue eyes widened behind her glasses.
Applejack. The ministry mayor mentioned you. You're her older brother.
Oh? You work for AJ, huh? She smiled nervously and gave a hesitant little nod.
Kind of. I'm actually with the Ministry of Arcane Sciences, though.
New to the hoof? He asked, his very presence making the crowd break around him like a river. I wondered if she appreciated it. She was kind of puny.
Does it show that much?
He chuckled softly. Yup. What's your name, miss? He asked with an easygoing smile. More impressive, he wasn't checking her out. She had the cute librarian look down perfectly, but his eyes stayed off her butt and on her face.
My name is, Maripony.
She stammered as she blushed and forced a grin. Ooh, some pony definitely liked Big Red.
Maripony. And actually, I have an appointment at the Ministry of Arcane Sciences hub. Only...
She looked around.
I'm not really sure where that is. I have a map. Oh dear.
She found her map, ground and mangled to pulp between the tracks. Ministries are around the plaza pit. Gotta go towards Mount Hoof, he said, pointing up the street at the knot of granite rising up from the south end of the island. I'll walk you, he offered with a casual smile.
Oh no, you don't have to do that,
she said with a blush. Yup, don't have to, but I will anyway. Take him on his offer, Maripony. You won't regret it. Of course, I guessed she probably accepted, given what I'd seen before. Though, maybe she did regret it. Why did I have to think that? It was like I'd come across a juicy novel, but had already read the last chapter. Such a spoiler. Still, she finally accepted his offer and seemed to relax a bit. So what's your business in the Hoof, if I may ask, Miss Maripony? He asked as they walked along the busy streets. Many of the buildings were already 10 stories tall and growing.
Organising this mess. Since the ministries were established, we've been running our tails off trying to get things organised. Pinkie Pie has it easy. It really doesn't matter if ponies are arranged in a department of amusement parks or the birthday cake corps. And Fluttershy's ministry is organising itself for her, I think. But the MAS and MWT are a lot more complicated. The Office of Interministry Affairs is trying to sort it all out. But with the reconstruction and all, things in Hoovington were a little fuzzy.
I see. So you're here for Twilight Sparkle, trying to get this hub situated? She glanced at him and then gave a little nod.
Something like that. The Manhattan and Canterlot and other hubs are already well organised. But since Hoofington is all about interministry cooperation, this hub needs to be established from the ground up. So here I am.
Surprised Twilight Sparkle didn't come here herself, Big Macintosh said as they stepped aside for a wagon loaded with crates and boxes.
Oh, she wanted to,
Maripony replied with a grunt.
But one of the things about being a ministry mare is that you can't take 2 steps without every pony falling all over themselves trying to either suck up to you or trying to be genuinely helpful and doing everything for you.
They reached the edge of an enormous pit in the earth. Here, the rails didn't just enter the bottom of the pit. They were actually on bridges spanning the gulf. More infrastructure was being built even further down in the pit. Maripony's eyes popped wide.
How in Equestria did something like this get dug out?
Big Macintosh chuckled. Sand dogs.
Sand dogs?
Big Macintosh walked to the fence surrounding the pit and pointed a hoof down towards where several teams of canines were working. Their claws seemed to magically tear away at the rock before them. Well, they used to call themselves Diamond Dogs. Then the war got started and their home was mined for gems for the war effort. Threw them out on their tails. So when Reconstruction started, Gold went out and offered them all a job to dig out the tunnels under the city. They get paid in gems, have a place to live, and Hoofington rises. Most of them hope to return home someday.
Oh, well, I hope that'll be possible. One day,
Maripony said softly.
Still, I'm glad some pony found a place for them.
Hoof has a place for every pony, long as you're willing to work and you're not strapped. Folks around here have a particularly powerful dislike for zebra folks. Maripony sighed.
But there's not even any evidence that the zebras even caused the fire.
The comment drew a lot of angry glances. If it hadn't have been for Big Macintosh, I suspect that some pony might have tried something. Maybe, maybe not. Hoofington rises all the same, he replied, eyeing the crowd. Anywho, this is Ministry Plaza. You want the purple one. Maripony seemed to balk at the sight of the buildings.
It's purple. Why purple?
Matches Twilight Sparkle. Maripony gaped at him and he chuckled. What? All the buildings are standardized. Gotta do something to make them stand out. Blue for awesome, white for image, pink for morale, orange for tech, yellow for peace, purple for arcane sciences.
I guess it does make sense,
She said with a sigh, looking over at the rising skyscraper covered in purple-coloured stone. Even half-finished, it was clear that it was already quite busy. Each ministry building filled up an entire face of the six-sided block around the pit, and they were built with bridges connecting each ministry to the ministry next to it.
That's still a lot of purple.
Well, Miss Maripony, there's your stop. I best, I guess, leave you to it.
Yes. Thank you, Big Macintosh.
She stammered. He looked back at her with that easy, confident smile. No worries, miss. If you're ever in Hoofington, let me know. I'm stationed over up Miramare. We can meet up in a little town I know named Withers if you'd rather get away from all the noise. Got some kin that live up that way too.
I'd like that very much,
she said with a happy bob of her head. She was reluctant to turn away, but did so with notable awkwardness as she trotted towards the ministry building. Big Macintosh chuckled as he turned as well. Maripony, huh? Coming out of the memory, I felt that familiar sense of disorientation, though really not as bad as leaving Stonewing's memory. So that was Macintosh's first memory of Maripony. I wonder why he'd saved it. Maybe he'd planned to give it to her as a present, entrusting it to Colonel Cupcake. No. I sat up in the bed, looking at the little glowing orb with a small frown.
No, not for when he got back. He saved it in case he didn't come home from Shattertooth Ridge.
Maybe Maripony hadn't wanted it. Maybe Colonel Cupcake hadn't been able to find the blue unicorn. Maybe I was wearing an explosive slave collar. I rolled to my hooves, seeing the grey band tight against my throat in the cracked mirror. U-21 sat next to the door, a floated detonator beside him.
None of that now.
Told you. Takes her forever to snap out of those things. A stallion at the table said as he flipped through Glory's copy of Scientific Equestria. P-21 set the magazine aside, his blue eyes hard and dark as the deepest holes of Stable 99, as he smiled at me. Evening, Blackjack. Miss me?
Footnote. Level up. New perk added. Hit the deck. You've been hit by one or too many explosions. Perhaps it's time to consider a new career. Plus 25 damage threshold against explosives. And just when Blackjack thought about properly confronting her issues and passed to the stable. At least the gang is back together. Ignoring all of that, I wish I could say I was surprised about finding out about Hydra being, well, that. But I never knew it to be extracted so viciously. I have read a couple manuals and such, but at least BJ put the poor thing out of its misery. And, just to make it very clear, do not use Hydra unless you are in the absolute most dire of circumstances. Music time. Here's the Wasteland Wailers with Dare Master. Enjoy, people.
The money? There's certainly no way you would you? Followed, so please return my call.